Here we're going to be talking about complex sentences. And a complex sentence, as you can see from the definition on the screen, is a sentence that contains one independent clause and at least one subordinate clause. Now this at least one is an important thing to remember because it will often have more than one subordinate clause. And how the type of clause it is will determine where it is in the sentence. Adjective clauses almost always follow the noun or pronoun that it's modifying, which is usually in the independent clause. And subordinate clause and adverb clauses, they can be after or before the independent clause. So you may have a sentence where you have subordinate clause, independent clause, subordinate clause, or you can have one where it's independent clause, subordinate clause, subordinate clause, or the two subordinate clauses can be before the independent clause. You get the idea. The critical thing to remember, though, is that when you have an independent clause, the comma usage for that independent clause is dependent upon whether the subordinate clause is before or after the independent clause. If it is after the independent clause, there is no comma. If it is before the independent clause, there is always a comma. Now, in the case where the subordinate clause follows the independent clause, there are a few exceptions. One of those is when you have the relative pronoun which for whatever reason almost always gets a comma. And then you have cases where the clause is what you would say is non-essential, which means that you can take it out of the sentence and it doesn't change the overall meaning of the sentence. So let's look at a few examples here. The coffee is hot, which is how I like it. Now in this case we have that which. We have the independent clause right here. The coffee is hot. It can stand on its own. Which is how I like it. Now again we have that subordinate clause following an independent clause. There shouldn't be a comma, but we have this exceptional which here. Now what you may not initially notice is this is actually two subordinate clause. Which is one clause, how I like it. Second clause. As you can see, this clause does not get a comma. It is following the coffee is hot. So that rule particularly follows, but the which is the unique case. So we have subordinate, subordinate. Let's look at this next one. The English students who are watching this video are filled with the joy of learning grammar in a stress-free environment. Now this is true, obviously. All those students who are at home, you are very thankful that you get to watch this over and over again. I'm sure it makes your evening. Okay, so we have, in this case, a subordinate clause that is set off by commas, yet isn't beginning with which. We have comma here and comma here. Now in this case, it's because this subordinate clause is non-essential. And by non-essential, you can take it out of the sentence and it doesn't change the overall meaning of the sentence because this is the independent clause right here. The English students are filled with the joy of learning grammar in a stress-free environment. Now you may look at this relatively long sentence and say, well, how do I know that there isn't another clause in this sentence? And you can look and see if there's another verb in there, but an easier way to do this is just to take out the phrases. And if it's a prepositional phrase, there can't be a verb in that phrase. So let's look at these phrases and we say, in a stress-free environment. Okay, well that can go. Of learning grammar. Alright, well that can go. With the joy. That can go. Now you might say, what about learning? Right? That looks like a verb. That's a participle. Okay, so that doesn't count as a verb. So we have, in this case, the English students are filled. Well, it's nice to have those phrases because you know what they're filled with, but nevertheless, that independent clause can stand on its own. The English students are filled. Who are watching this video, a non-essential clause that doesn't change the meaning of the English students are filled. So, it is set off by commas. Now let's look at another one. When I think of great writing, I think of Mark Twain. Now in this case, we have an adverb clause right here at the beginning, right? When I think of great writing. Because when I think of great writing, it's modifying think, right? And so it can go at either end of the sentence. I think of Mark Twain when I think of great writing. When I think of great writing, I think of Mark Twain. The difference here is when you would use the comma. So when I think of great writing, we have the subordinating clause first. Subordinating. We have the independent clause here. If the subordinating clause is before the independent clause, there needs to be a comma there. If it were reversed, if you have I think of Mark Twain when I think of great writing, there is no comma there. Let's have another look. This is a sentence from Mark Twain that he's referring to the difference between a starving dog and a starving human. If you pick up a starving dog and make him prosperous, he will not bite you. Now, in this case, I left the comma out on purpose just to see if at home you can figure out where it would go. So take a moment, see if you can figure it out. Okay, if you're able to say, well, this, if you pick up a starving dog and make him prosperous, if you say, well, that's a subordinating clause, well, then you would be right, and you would know, aha, the comma goes right there. Subordinating first, independent second. Now, from our previous lecture, you can see that this simple sentence has a lot going on it because we have pick, verb, make, verb, we have dog, him, right? We have a lot going on in this sentence, yet it's still simple. It's just something with a compound verb. And I know that seems complicated, but this is still a complex sentence. Okay, let's move on. All right, herbal tea tastes so much better when it's coffee. Again, we have a adverb clause here because if we were looking at what the word is in front of this clause, we have when it's coffee, right? Adjective clause is going to usually be modifying the noun right in front of it, and unfortunately there is no noun right in front of it. So the only noun that's right in front of it, is tea, right? And so it doesn't apply. It is going to be an adverb clause, so you can even change it around. We'll move it down so it doesn't go off the screen there. When it's coffee, herbal tea tastes so much better. So the focus here is on coffee. If you have it afterwards, the focus is on herbal tea because it's usually whatever clause comes first that you want your reader to focus upon. So herbal tea tastes so much better when it's coffee. Now in this case, obviously the subordinating clause is second, no comma, independent clause is first. When the subordinating clause is first, you're going to need a comma there. How about this one? When I am in France, I like the coffee that makes me dance. Okay, see if you can figure out where the comma goes in this sentence. If you said, when I am in France, comma, you're absolutely right. Now, we have, in this complex sentence, two subordinating clauses. When I am in France, that makes me dance. Now, one of them can move, the other one cannot. Can you tell which one? Well, by now you can probably say, well, this is the adverb clause because it doesn't have the adjective, the noun right in front of it, so this one can move around. This one is modifying coffee, so it really doesn't make much sense to move it around. If I wanted to clear out these marks and say, let's move aside when I am in France. I like the coffee that makes me dance. If I put it in front, that makes me dance, I like the coffee. It doesn't make any sense. However, if I move the adverb clause around, I like the coffee that makes me dance when I am in France, well, it makes sense now, but again, stylistically, I want to focus on when I'm in France, so I want to put that clause first. I like the coffee that makes me dance. Now, when I have the subordinating clause first, I need to add a comma between the subordinating clause and the independent clause. This subordinating clause is following this independent clause, is, so therefore there is no comma right there. Let's look at another one. Now, going along with the same idea that you can have multiple clauses, multiple subordinate clauses in one sentence, this is an extreme example taken from a British nursery rhyme. This is the house that Jack built. This is the malt that lay in the house. This is the rat that ate. This is the cat that chased. Now each of these is a complex sentence, right? We have this is the house, independent clause, that Jack built, subordinate clause, that lay in the house, subordinate clause, that ate. It's a very short, but it has subject verb, that chased, right? And in each case that you have several complex sentences. Well, you can combine these using just the subordinate clauses. So let's combine them here. So this is the house that Jack built. Alright, so we have that Jack built right here, and we can add this line here. We have this is the malt that lay in the house that Jack built. Well, now we have the rat. Alright, so let's move this is, and we have this is the rat that ate the malt that lay in the house that Jack built. Again, you have all these subordinating clauses that are lining up. That Jack built. That lay in the house. That ate the malt. Right? In each case, in each time, you don't need a comma because they're after the independent clause. This is the rat. Alright, so let's move this again. We'll take the whole thing this time. This is the cat that chased the rat, that ate the malt, that lay in the house that Jack built. Alright, so we have that chased. Alright, now, it's actually adding on to the clause behind it that chased the rat, that ate the malt, that lay in the house that Jack built. As you can see, you can have one long complex sentence, and in each case, if you wanted to do it like a math formula, you have independent clause plus subordinating plus subordinating plus subordinating. You know, so I plus the, how many we have here? 1, 2, 3, 4. So we have plus x equals complex. Right. I plus s plus s plus s plus s. Right. And you can have an almost infinite number of subordinate clauses, and it will still be grammatically correct. This nursery rhyme goes on and on and on. It talks about a horse and a cow with a crumpled horn, so forth and so on. And it's still grammatically correct. It's unwieldy, and it's not something I would advise, but you're still stretching the boundaries of what is grammatically correct when you deal with a complex sentence. All right, so let's do a quick recap. First, complex sentence is going to involve an independent clause and one or more subordinate clauses. Those subordinate clauses can be adverb or adjective, and in some cases noun, and we didn't talk about those, but noun clauses are when the clause acts like the subject or the direct object. And depending upon the grammatical nature of that clause is going to determine whether it can be moved around in the sentence. Adverb clauses can move all around the sentence. Adjective clauses tend to stick right next to the noun or pronoun that it is modifying. And then in the end, you can see that a subordinate clause, you can have as many as you want in one of these sentences as long as you have the correct structure for it. If the independent clause is first, the subordinate clause is second, you don't need a comma. If the subordinate clause is first and the independent clause is second, you will need a comma. Thank you very much.